you're getting what you need and that it's helpful and useful for you, the material that I'm presenting and the discussion that we have through the chat room from this podcast. So last week we started a series that constitutes a self-assessment process. And the reason for that is that I want you to understand what are the most important factors in determining if your clutter is hoarding or if it's not, all right? Because that's going to tell you what your particular unique constellation of vulnerabilities are. Those vulnerabilities are the template for the type of help that you as an individual who has growing out of control clutter or already there out of control clutter that constitutes hoarding, that's what you need. All right, there is no formula, there's no one size fits all. You have a unique path of combination of vulnerabilities. We outlined them in the 3 paths. We opened up those 3 paths and we talked about what the other comorbidities were. Comorbidities, that's just a $5 word for either physical health, mental health, or the combination of both, that place you at this point in time and until you resolve those vulnerabilities well enough on a path to creating hoarding, all right? We also talked about 5 red flags. And I did that because we have a lot of people who are coming in every week who are new. And they can catch up with us by viewing the podcasts on hoarding.ca. Okay, they can play catch up that way, but I wanted them to kind of have where am I at this point in time? And those 5 red flags aren't just random questions, all right? They are tied to the 3 criteria for something to constitute a hoarding situation. And also, they're also then indicators of what your highest risk factors are. We're going to talk more about that today because it's all very interesting to know about yourself and to know what your vulnerabilities are. That's interesting information to have. It's essential. But the reason to do that is then to move forward and say, okay, now what do I actually actively do with that? How does this information serve me to allow me to take the steps I need actively to get myself out of this situation, all right, given enough time. Excuse me. We also talked about the 10 most common things hoarded. I assure you that anything you can imagine, even if it's not on that 10 most common list, that you can imagine exists in this world, somewhere is being hoarded. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, all right? Need is in the fear and the thinking styles of the individual who gravitates to, we were talking about animals. It was some podcast when we have a little more time left over. I want to tell you the story of Gunther. Just remind me to come back to that someday when we've got a little bit of extra time, because animal hoarding is very, very complicated. There is no easy hoarding situation, all right? So hats off to you, every single one of you who show up here making an effort to turn it around, all right? This is not an easy thing. It can be done, but it takes a lot of perseverance. It also takes really good information. So the other thing we talked about, as I said before, were the 3 paths to hoarding. The definition, remember, what is the definition of hoarding? First, there must be what most people would describe as an excessive accumulation and a failure to resolve that. Now, we're not talking necessarily about throwing everything out. It's resolving it. and go back in previous podcasts to review what your best options are and what the pros and cons of each of those are. Probably 5 options for resolving the buildup. All right. What are the pros and cons? The best choice has a con, folks. There is no perfect solution. It's cost benefit. All right. And that depends on you. I wanted to stop for a second and say, I've been working with a family that is really, really, really in trouble. And it's affecting the children, it's affecting the couple, it's affecting the marriage. And the husband lives with pretty severe, and until about 3 months ago, when we started to work together, undiagnosed, certainly untreated, severe adult ADHD. It's affected every aspect of his life. And I was trying to get him to kind of get into the swing of making decisions that he can live with. But he gets distracted by the ADHD. Yesterday, when I was working with him, we were in the garage after we'd been to the storage unit, and we're trying to close the storage unit down to anything that we're going to work with then would be through the garage, save himself a lot of money every month. And it was all very theoretical. He really was having a hard time. And then we picked up a package of something that was, and I won't say what it is because I don't want to identify him in any way, but it was something that was very specific to him and a great time in his life when he had produced something that he was really proud of. And when we picked it up, it just looked like an ordinary package wrapped in plastic. There was nothing spectacular about it. And so I picked it up not knowing what it was, and I said, okay, would you say this is a 1, 2, 3? Is this a 7, 8, 9, 10? Or is it somewhere in the middle? And he said, that's mine. And he identified it. And he said, I'm keeping that. And I said, that is your best example. I was so proud of him for focusing long enough and owning, this is my strongest 1, 2, 3. Why is that important? Because when you find your strongest 1, 2, 3 and you compare it to everything else and you find your strongest 7, 8, 9, 10, that thing is like, what is that still doing here? No, that can go. If something's got to go, this can go. Those 2 things are going to be your indicators, almost like a Geiger counter. So it was like it's a very small story, right? And moment in somebody's life. That was the beginning of him being able to own every decision and not having to be afraid. What if, just in case, I don't know, I'm not sure. We've now found that thing that is the gold standard. All right. So I want you today to be looking for your gold standards. Just one example that you can use as your Geiger counter indicator. We also talked about what constituted unwise and often unsafe adaptations to living in a hoarded environment. Who are the types of individuals who either are already actively distressed or they have a legitimate reason to be distressed about the condition of your hoarded environment? All right, we went through the list of those. So we're not going to go through it again today. Go back and listen to the last episode before this one, and that information is there. Another really important thing that we defined in that podcast is, what is the difference between cluttering and hoarding? And when does cluttering become hoarding? Where is that line? What are the indicators? We outlined 5 types. The 5 types of hoarding disorder. Remember? Indiscriminate, discriminate. When discriminate has gone on long enough, it tends to become combined and look like indiscriminate, but you know what it is. You know it's combined and that this is a life cycle result. It's gone on long enough that things are getting more jumbled and chaotic. All right, but when you start to deconstruct the combined, You start finding the patterns, and the collections now can be identified. You realize that's an extra, that should be the 6th red flag to clutter. Diogenes syndrome. Diogenes syndrome is usually found among our senior population only because it's gone undetected for an extraordinary length of time. Abject self-neglect and squalor. It is saddening, the condition that those folks are living in. If you think your situation is bad, a Diogenes situation is beyond belief, all right? And there are way too many of those people stuck in it. We talked about animal hoarding. I think we'll do one whole podcast at some point about animal hoarding because we keep having to rush over it. All right. So today, what we're going to talk about, do you see yourself on any of the 3 paths to hoarding? I want you to think about that. And the 3 paths, okay? First, genetics, right? We know that there are 4 chromosomes with markers in common. Chromosome 14 was identified by Johns Hopkins University or Medical Center, their research medical center, when they did a collaborative study. That gene, chromosome 14, is tied to a familial pattern, an inherited familial pattern of OCD. One of the things I also, as we're at this point, I thought to mention to you, because I think it's really important, is when we're going through this information, please don't make it about, oh, this is the way I'm sick, oh, this is the way I'm damaged, oh, this is the way I'm somehow, and something negative, all right? Do you blame yourself for your blue eyes? Do you blame yourself for the shape of your ears? Do you blame yourself for the color of your hair? How tall you are? Whether you inherited diabetes? Do you do that? Well, don't use this information to pathologize yourself. Okay? The reason this information, I'm offering this information because it's pretty deep level information as far as hoarding treatment. The reason I'm doing this for you and giving you this is because I want you to have a shortcut. I want you to go, I identify with that. That's my constellation. Think of it like a formula for something wonderful. You are wonderful, all right? And every formula has a little bit of, that doesn't smell so good. That's not a positive, but it balances, because nobody gets in and out of this world without having something to deal with. And you could have done a lot worse than to inherit a vulnerability for hoarding, right? Hoarding can be resolved. A lot of things we inherit can't be, all right? So those genetic markers, all right? Now, the other thing that happens is that if there is a genetic predisposition, not everybody in your family is going to get it. It's the 1 in 4 rule, right? Okay. And so if you did inherit that, then you may also have lived in, to some extent, a hoarded environment. Now, you probably didn't call it hoarding at that time. You probably called it pack rat or collector or something else, all right? But if it meets those 3 criteria, guess what? It's a hoarding situation, all right? So when you live in a hoarded environment, any degree of hoarded environment, you form beliefs and values and behavior patterns. And sometimes it doesn't feel so unusual. Don't use the word abnormal. Doesn't feel so unusual. Listen to this information. This is going to define what the target is. Now you're going to know what that hoarding target is so that you can better identify it and how it plays out in your life, and you can hit that target now. Use it as an indicator and a shortcut, okay? The second thing is, growing up, as I said, in a hoarded environment sometimes normalizes the behavior. And we learn our values, we learn our boundaries, our limits. We're going to talk in a little while about the 3 attachment patterns in hoarding. We can be taught those, okay, at some loving family member's knee. Right? Question is, how are they working for you? Right? Or how are they working against you? Are you applying those attachment patterns out of a healthy context to too many things, and that immobilizes you, brings you to a point of overwhelmed and then inertia? Many people have told me that's where they're at right now. Okay. We've also talked about higher risk comorbid factors. Let's talk a little bit about those now. Anxiety. One of the things, as we're talking about these comorbid factors, all right, there's a list later on we're going to go through. I want you to ask yourself before you say, oh, I've got that, oh, I've got that, oh, I've got a little of this. Excuse me, allergy season. I want you to say to yourself, so if I have that, what do I need? What form of help do I need? And how is it playing out, all right, in my life? So it then becomes something on your to-do list. I need more information about this. I need to understand myself better because I need to get handles on this. So we're talking about anxiety disorders. Also ask yourself, what is it like to live with any of these? Okay, these are not a cakewalk or a picnic. And they do affect our lives. Everybody gets something though, folks, right? And ask yourself, if you're on medication for these or treatment for these, depression is a really good example, everyone. It's this ebb and flow, this up and down, right? It's like a seesaw, like of the medication. You're put on a medication, you've got to stay on it, and it's not really taking effect that well until the levels are reached, and then you kind of plateau, and then you go along, and maybe it didn't work, but you have to come off of it. Then you have to be on something else, and it has to reach its levels until they find a good combination. Sooner or later, there is a lifespan for how long that combination is going to work effectively, optimally for you. Something else will be invented that you may want to try. There'll be that up and down, okay? I want you to factor that in the next time, not as an excuse, not as a way not to take responsibility for your own health, but as a realistic guidepost for, why is this difficult? If you're on some medication right now that affects your functioning or needs adjusting, I want you to factor that into reality. When you're judging yourself for, I didn't accomplish very much. Okay, I want you to, don't look for an excuse, but look for facts. And if that's a fact, then not how do we give up? How do we work around that? What else might help you over that hump, right? That's what I'm here to help you. Get over the hump, not give up because there's a risk factor or a vulnerability. Eating disorders, all right, very disruptive. And it can cause a fixation on food. And I would also call, it's probably not the normal definition of hoarding disorders. I would call that stocking up in the fear of not having or being ready, to the extent that your stockpile, the expiry date is so long past that it's no longer really reliably edible. That habit of stocking up, that food deprivation fear, all right, that having to be ready for the next apocalypse. Of course, this is a bad time to be talking about an apocalypse in the middle of COVID, but all right, that stuff you saved for 4 years is not a stockpile, folks. Okay, it's a fixture. It's like a piece of furniture now. Don't start opening those tins. All right, so you're not really ready for the apocalypse. All right, you've got a false front there. All right, addictions. All right, now addiction can be any kind of risk-taking behavior. It could be drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, adrenaline addiction, and risk-taking behavior. All right. Tics and Tourette's is another one. Autism. I've included Asperger's here as well because Asperger's has been taken out of the DSM-5, but anybody who deals in mental health knows that it is a valid diagnosis. All right, and it does affect people's functioning. So Lisa asks, excessive purchasing is another form of addiction. Yeah, that's right. It is. It is. Excessive buying. Schizophrenia. All right. What's it like to be anywhere on the continuum of schizophrenia? Dementia and Alzheimer's. There's no good news for dementia and Alzheimer's. If someone is living in a hoarded or creating a hoarded environment, or it's already created, and you suspect, go on the Cincinnati clinic, the Mayo Clinic, good source information. Find out what the criteria, what are the diagnostic criteria for dementia and Alzheimer's. And if you see enough of those ticked, the solution to this is supervision. All right. All right. Okay. Attention deficit disorder. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That's one of the main reasons, all right, that I'm going to be doing Conquer the Clutter, Strategies to Identify, Manage, and Overcome Hoarding in an audiobook, because probably 20% of the people that I work with are somewhere on that spectrum of ADD and ADHD. And it's just a mean, unrealistic thing to expect them to wade through a book and remember very much of it. That is not their representational system for processing the world. They're not as visual as, I think it's 68% that have a visual representational system of the world. Social isolation, social phobia, depression, personality disorders. We've talked a little bit about obsessive compulsive disorder, avoidant personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder. When you see paranoia and people think somebody has come in to remove something, or somebody's moved their things around, or things are gone and they can't explain because nobody else was in the house, that could be a shortcut to going to really good source information and finding out whether that person is living somewhere on the spectrum of developing dementia. Okay. Yes, Linda. Thank you for recognizing that some people do need an audio information. It's one of the reasons I don't want this just to be an audio podcast. I want it to be audio visual, so we get everybody's representational system. Aging with mobility issues. Now, aging with mobility issues is one of those situations where quite often when I go in, those folks do not meet the criteria psychologically for hoarding, for engaging in hoarding behavior, and yet they're living in a mighty hoarded environment. Okay, because quite a number of people don't raise the flag as they get sufficiently aged, all right, to say, I need help, because they don't want some well-meaning family member or social worker to come in and decide that they should be living in supervised or other accommodation other than maintaining their independence. And some of those people need What they need is they need a buddy. They need physical help because they can't keep up with the debris that builds up and the amount of unsolicited paper that comes into our lives every day. We talked about biological factors like chromosomes. The other thing too that we have found is in the brains of hoarders, true hoarders, it's not unusual to find the amygdala, the excitement center of the brain, gets activated and cued, triggered, okay? A little brighter, a little stronger, and a little more often when they're looking at something that is of particular interest to them. And lastly, we've talked about those individuals where there are certain times in their life they find themselves not just chronically somewhat disorganized. The mud is a little harder to get through as far as staying organized, and then something happens, an event happens, okay? So there are two basic choices. Now, this I want you to pay attention to. There are two basic choices when someone starts to become overwhelmed, right? The first choice is they acquire, they save, and the more they have and the closer it is around them, they kind of cocoon and nest with it, the more soothing it is. It soothes them. The more they have the things that they really like, that they're triggered by, and the closer that those things are around them, the better they feel. All right. The second, though, is another camp entirely, usually. Now, it can look like exactly the same situation when you open the door and look at it, but you can't judge a book by its cover. You need to get to know yourself, and I need to get to know the individuals a little better to find out whether this is what's happening. That second camp, people stop processing the things of everyday life, the mail, newspapers, if they have them delivered, flyers, if they have them delivered. They're not actually using them, all right? They're not even particularly interested in them. They're just not processing them on a regular basis. They open a tin, or they make food, or they fill in the blank. They do some activity that requires tangible things as part of it. They don't process it to the end. And then what happens is it's human nature. We can only afford to look at what we feel competent and ready and able to handle, to deal with. Or we start stick handling logic. Okay, well, it's just for now. I put that down. I'll get back to that. I'm going to, or some other reason that makes it okay not to deal with it right now. But the basic problem is you don't feel competent. You don't feel able physically, mentally, spiritually. You just don't have the motivation to get up and go. All right? So it gets left. Right? So that builds up. And the next stage after that stick handling logic is to put on blinders, because we can only afford to look at what we feel able to deal with. And then the blinders become tighter and tighter and tighter till there's only one spot that we see. And generally, when I get called in by people, the spot is they can put one foot in front of the other to get themselves out of their accommodation. And once that door closes behind them, one foot in front of the other, usually to one spot. All right, one spot. We have Nat here from New Mexico. Welcome, Nat. Nat's been trying to get together with us for a while. So what they do then is they manage to pass outside. No one would have an inkling that this individual goes home to a severely hoarded environment. And my experience has been that these people, these individuals stuck on this, in this camp, all right, they're your doctors, your lawyers, your banker, your accountant, teachers, nurses. Did I mention teachers? Did I mention doctors? All right. The reason is that the production, storage, retrieval of information in hard copy or digitally is key to their professional functioning. We also have interpreters, researchers. All right, you can see where information, documents, journals, books, information, paper is key to their functioning. And they are still out functioning, and they are functioning very well outside of the environment, except for the fact that every day as you and I go through our day, we get little jolts of joy, little, you did a great job, wow, well done. Or you can say to yourself, you know, I finished that, I did it, yay, I'm okay, one thing off the list. These individuals, unfortunately, tell me that every time they get one of those affirmations, 90% of the time what they say to themselves is, if you only knew the truth. Yeah, but you don't know what I go home to, which means that they don't get their cup filled the same way as their peers, as you and I do, all right, because they've negated it based on the secret that they carry. All right. Now we're going to talk about attachment relationship patterns to things. This is really important, right, because basically there are only three. The three attachment patterns that people form or are taught, okay, as a child. The first is a sentimental, mental relationship that occurs when you use an item as a cue for an important emotional experience or time in your life. Right? So there is nothing wrong with having some mementos, but it's when you believe that those mementos are in place of the memory that you have, you become dependent on those as a substitute. All right, you're not going back, keep taking the power back and saying, you know, if I close my eyes, I can picture that. Or you hear music, or somebody says something, or you see a picture, or an ad in the paper, or a TV show, and it triggers your memory. Oh yeah, that was great. Oh yeah. All right, you become dependent on these things. Then what you do is you multiply them. So it's the belief that if you don't have a memento, you don't have that program from a show you went to or a production you went to. Not one, I mean, keeping a few is not an issue. It's when you believe that you're incomplete, that experience is incomplete because you don't have it. Here's the problem with that, though. Most of those are kept in a drawer somewhere where, you know, once a year when you're trying to find something else is when you trip over them. They're not adequate as a memento because they don't act as a memento. All right, they're not giving you anything. You have the memory here. Don't give away the power. If you don't allow yourself to become dependent on something, a tangible object, as a substitute for your memories, as the way your memory will get cued, if you don't do that, don't become dependent, you will get cued by 100 other things that are diverse and in your environment already. Give yourself the chance to develop that confidence. You never really lose a memory. Muscles have memory, all right? If your muscles can have a memory, your brain sure can hold on to your memories. Here's the great news and the bad news, okay? When you get old and and you're drooling, all right, and your memory has faded, the things that are longest ago, you will be able to remember. You will not probably be able, might not be able to remember what you had for breakfast. All right, so they're not going anywhere. You don't need a gazillion mementos. Okay. The things that people keep affirmations or mementos are things like a lost relationships, things that harken back, or a job, or a career, or a business, something you are particularly happy and proud of achieving. It's not all or nothing. It's a question of how many and where you keep them, that you could, if you have your degree or your diploma or an achievement award or a picture framed and it's up there so that when you walk by, all right, you see it, you go, oh yeah, that was great. You're getting something back for that. I wish I could show you the back of my door here. All right. I have pictures all over the back of my door, photographs all over the back of my door. I attach those photographs there because they are what is left over from a complete bureau of a time in one's life you didn't pay anymore for duplicates. All right. And I have a whole extra supply downstairs of photographs that I'm in the process of organizing into 2 bundles, one for my daughter, one for my son. And if there are enough, one for my granddaughter, one for my grandson, and they're going off to their house. This will be, so I'm choosing well. I'm choosing the ones that fill my heart. But they're there and they give me something every day. The things that you're depending on emotionally for sentimental reasons, are they giving you anything back? Think about how many are the jewels and how you might store or display those so that they give you that emotional feedback. Okay? Okay. Something you're proud of or achieving. The things are reminders of what you've lost. All right? How good does that make you feel? When you keep something and say, yeah, that's over. That was then. All right, now, look at now. Okay, that's not what you want to do to yourself. That's like getting 2 shovels and digging yourself in a hole deeper, reminding yourself of what you've lost. You've got to keep just what you absolutely need and that supports you from your past, because you cannot have a future if you don't make room for it. Right? Don't look back. That's not the way you're headed. You're headed forward. The future is forward. Stop looking back. All right? Okay. Get your comfort from today. From reminding yourself, like I do here, that the people who I love and who love me the most aren't with me. They're miles and miles and miles away, every one of them. All right? But they're still with me emotionally and spiritually. All right? If a relationship has ended, I'm not keeping pictures of it. It's time to put it to bed. It's time to put it to bed. All right? The things you keep need to sustain you, comfort you, and remind you of how loved you were and how you loved. All right? Okay. Because one of the things that does happen when you keep that other loss thing, all right, is basically what you're doing is you're convincing yourself that if you keep that thing, it isn't really gone. Isn't really gone. All right? It is gone. It's over. And the more things you keep as a reminder of the person or time in your life when you were happier and mattered more, all right, and you use it for a negative, the more you buffer yourself against having to come to terms with the loss. Okay? You're buffering yourself by trying to deny that loss. And that keeps you in some state of a grief state of mind. All right? And unresolved grief is one of the most destructive emotions that we can have. All right, so if it's grief you need to do, if it's grief work because it really is over and it's time to put it to bed, it's time to move forward, then let's do that grief work. Send me an email, anybody who's in that situation, and I'll design one of these podcasts around hoarding and grief work. Okay? All right. Let's move forward with this. If there is anyone who keeps something because, I'm not talking about one or two objects or a very few, all right? I'm talking about everything that belonged to that person because they actually believe that the person's essence, their energy, it's like when the person leaned on that thing or held that thing, they fused with it. All right, I would like you to send me an email, all right, because that's a special kind of help that you need. And I can understand that. Remember the story of the dining room table, all right, and all the people who are no longer with me, who were part of the best, the worst, and the most important times of our life as a family, all right. Yes, they were at that table, but I want to help you separate so that you realize that you still have a relationship with those people, even if it's a divorce. Nothing can, and you regret that divorce, you mourn, or it's the loss of a person. Nothing can take away the relationship you had, even though at a different time that relationship changed. Nothing can take away the happiness and the meaning. All right. Okay. So remember, it's not all or nothing. It's a question of degree. There's no clear and easy answer. For example, the logic of holding on to baby clothes and baby furniture. All right. Yes, at some point you may have a grandchild, but how many times are you going to have moved by the time that's likely to happen? There has to be a logic to it. There has to be a degree. And you also want to check too that when you're avoiding acknowledging or warranting transition times in your life, it's not just about the baby clothes. It could also be, and it has been many times, where parents hold on to the crib, the stroller, blah, 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 half a basement full of baby stuff, or half a basement full of their children's artwork and books and their projects from school, because maybe they're not ready to face the fact that those children have flown the nest, and that if those things are truly important, go through and find the 1, 2, 3s and let the others go. Like myself, you can always send what's left over to the person and they can decide for themselves what is important to them. All right. So when we apply this sentimental attachment, another question I want to ask you is, how many other things other than tangible objects do you apply this emotional thinking to? Some people, many who are on a continuum of OCD, invest in the belief that the stuff has a voice. It's not that they hear voices, right? But that when they want to discard, get rid of things that somehow the things don't really want to leave. All right. So they have anthropomorphized their internal relationship onto those things. And, you know, you love them and they somehow are rewarding, like they actually are rewarding. It's not that that tangible thing gives you something back. All right. It's that they're actually rewarding you. You may love your things. There isn't one of them that cares two hoots about you. That's a really important fact to keep in mind. All the giving is out. There is no loving or giving coming back to you because from that actual inanimate thing, it doesn't have a vote. It doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't care if it ends up in the garbage. It doesn't care if you're having a bad day. All right. Having a few reminders or things that give you joy, that is something that you are giving back to yourself. Right? The pictures on my wall, on the back of my door, all right, they give back. I give myself back. If something happened to those pictures, I still had that memory. I still had that memory. Now I'll go in here. Now I'll go in here and remember the time in my life, the person, the achievement. All right. All right. So, question I want you to ask yourself about sentimental, okay, is there enough storage space in your environment currently for your current life? You can find what you need, you can house what you need. You don't have a daily routine of chaos trying to sort, clean, find. And is there room for your future? Have you left room for your future? Or are you stuck in the past with all this stuff you're trying to carry with you? It's not all or nothing. Go to Conquer the Clutter, strategies to identify, manage, and overcome hoarding. All right. Look at the Elaine scaling process. Find, like that client yesterday, that one thing that just sets your heart on fire. Okay. No, that stays. Find that and find the best example of what is that still doing here? No, that can go. And then start your sorting process, running the best number 1 by and the best example of a 7 by. All right, you know what you'll achieve pretty darn quickly? You will find the 4s, set the 4s aside. You don't have to decide about the 4s right now. There may be room once enough other stuff that isn't as important, once you compare. Okay, there may be room for most of those 4s. You're also going to find the 6s, which are hangers on to the 7, 8, 9, 10s. See if you can let those go. Now, all you've got to decide are the 5s. You just went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 being settled to having one pile of stuff. Okay, that's what we're aiming for. Okay, the second type of attachment to relationships is aesthetic. Aesthetic is tough. It's tough because it has a huge chemical hormonal reaction in our body when we see it. When you get a strong, immediate adrenaline or dopamine or serotonin rush, what happens is that when that happens during a decision-making process, it makes the decision-making so much more difficult. We'll come to questions. I'm gonna end up with the third type of attachment, and then we'll handle all the questions, even if we run over. Okay. So what happens is that you've got this woo of adrenaline rush to your brain, to the pleasure center. All right, and then depending on how many times you've done it, you give yourself good reasons. All right, for the aesthetic. Keeping of things. Oh, I love it. But how many? All right. And then it gives you that override of decision making. No, I need to make a choice about this. If I'm going to make space for this, it has to give me something back. It overrides that when you get hooked on that rush, all right, for aesthetic. How do you handle that? Never make a decision on the spot. Okay, wean yourself back to go on pause. That's when in Conquer the Clutter, Strategies to blah, 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 I want you to go to the Conscious Acquiring chapter now. All right, and I want you to memorize that. That's the process that has saved many, many people. All right. One time, just one funny example. All right. It saved one of my clients from bringing home a barbecue that there was no intent to have when she walked in that store. All right. So sometimes these are big ticket items, but even those small ticket items, they add up. Watch COVID and the isolation right now and the ease and the temptation for online shopping. Go to the online shopping channel chapter in the book. Okay, there are strategies. Okay, when you're attracted to a particular type of object and you experience that anticipatory pleasure, you may be experiencing what I call aesthetic attachment relationship with that item. All right, be careful you don't give it excessive meaning. Even a slight increase in dopamine, even a slight, forget that huge hormonal rush, all right? Even a slight increase in dopamine can cause your memory to suffer. I don't remember what it said in the book. I don't remember. So if that's the case, all right, what I'm going to do in one of these, probably the next one, is I'm going to put up the cheat sheet cards that I give my clients. There's, should I bring this home? Should I let this go? What are the risk factors? And the environmental risk that overdoing any of these can cause. Right? And you can print that off and you can have it laminated. Keep it in your purse, keep it in your pocket, keep it in your wallet. At least put yourself on pause, go to the ladies' room, go to the gents' room, and read those questions and answer them for yourself. It's not going to disappear in that time. All right? Okay. The third attachment pattern is intrinsic. This is tough. This is what I call the engineer's brain. With intrinsic attachment relationships, the item itself seems to have significant or potential importance. You give it that importance, all right? And generally when you give it that importance, you give it exponentially more importance than the thing actually deserves. You have a strong, inviolable belief in avoiding waste. That's one stick handling logic, all right, that can happen. It's a sin to waste. Well, it's not a good thing to waste, and it's a great thing to recycle if you can actually keep up with it. But if trying to over-recycle, trying to over-avoid what you consider wasting is creating a hoarded environment for you, that's too high a price to pay. Maybe we need to help you develop some additional skills and strategies to manage the incoming so that you can live your belief. All right, you can live your it's a sin to waste. You can live, I want to be the best environmental citizen in this world. That requires some skills and strategies. It is not a good idea to be attempting that before you have those skills and strategies, right? Because now you've got a personal crisis, which is going to cost you quality of life. And people say, I see, this is what I call the engineer's brain, where they see, and you don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to have any college or university diploma, degree at all, training at all. This is made up of very highly capable people. Okay, I don't care if you've got a grade 3 education, you can have an engineer's brain. Highly capable people, all right? Generally, they're crafty, or they're talented, they're handy, or they're very frugal, or they're a combination of all of those. The key element of an intrinsic relationship with an object is that you see the importance and transferable use in a disproportionate number of things, and you feel responsible. It's your duty to use those objects in every other possible way. Some people feel that the degree to which they can demonstrate an item's transferable usefulness demonstrates how worthy, how capable, how resourceful they are, or sometimes it's just how right they are in their belief. You can have a belief. No one else is obliged to have that belief. The problem that often arises from the number of things kept is that they don't actually all get recycled. And they certainly don't all have a home, a permanent place in your home. The other problem is that the more you keep, this is true, folks, the less you are likely to be able to find any object, especially when you need those things in a hurry. There's a failure, again, it's a failure to accept reality that the collections will, in fact, not end up being useful. If they're lost in piles, keeping them because they're useful. If they're not housed, if they're not accessible, all right, then they're not useful, especially in the numbers that are often kept of potentially useful things, all right? Another thing that happens is when you keep a lot of useful things and you have become overwhelmed by the numbers and the piles and the storage is chaotic, you go out and you buy more because they are useful. You just can't find the other 3 that you have. And I'm not mocking you. I'm telling you what people actually tell me. Collections can also be impossible to maintain and keep in the condition needed for future use. Okay, so now I want you to think about that, and I want you to answer this question. Was this multi-assessment process over the last 2 sessions helpful to you? Do you know yourself better as a collector, a clutterer, or possibly somebody who hoards? Do you know yourself better? And how? Why do you know yourself better? Right? And I want you, before you come back next week, to have sat down and invested in yourself. I want you to have sat down, even if you have to re-listen to the other podcast, the prior podcast, the one before this one is what I mean, and make notes, right? I want you to have some ideas about a plan, okay? A plan of just not how to get out of it necessarily, but what do you as an individual need? And then let's start putting those stepping stones in place, because these podcasts are about more than talk. This is not just talk. This is talk to resolution. I want you to have the life you want to have, all right? And I want you to have the things that mean the most to you with you while you live that life. What I want you also to do, though, is to face reality that some things need to be left in the past because they belong to the past. All right? Okay, let's look at some questions. Okay. To everyone, good morning, Elaine. Hello, everyone. Excessive purchasing is also another form of addiction. You're absolutely right, Lisa. You're absolutely right. And you know where you can find that? It doesn't happen in all cases, all right? But if you find yourself on a roll, on a rush, either in person at the store, oh, that's useful. And you're loading up, or online, all right? Or online. Then it's that feeling of rapidity. All right. I want you to see that as a warning sign, and I want you to put the brakes on. It isn't, I'm not saying don't ever acquire anything, but I want you to get control of making conscious, deliberate decisions that actually give you what you're looking for. Yeah, Nat, that's great. The follow through, yeah, is what Nat calls it. Nat's joining us from New Mexico today. Rebecca, to everyone. Oh my, I need to hear this again. Merit, I can't read that. The need to have a visual reminder. Yeah, the bits of near detritus, because I feel that letting go of the bit is the same, yes, as the memory. It isn't. The memory is in you, Rebecca. And I want you to know that that is absolutely true. There will be 100 other ways that your memory is triggered if you don't make yourself dependent on one thing. It's not about having the thing. It's about how you invest in making yourself dependent on that thing. Like somehow that is a safety net against the loss. It isn't. It isn't. From Leanne, to everyone. Good points you've raised. In one room, I have gone through everything and kept everything that is like a 1, 2, 3. Good for you, Leanne. Take a bow. And gotten rid of the rest. Unfortunately, I still have too much. That's okay. So I have to go through them all again. It isn't, I don't want you to think about it as repeat. I have to, oh, now I'm going to do it again. I want you to think of as the first cut. Okay, apply that scaling process and make your first cut. Make it meaningful though, all right? Make it as though it was the last. Knowing that if you have too much, now I want you to take the best number 1 and the best number 4. All right, but before you do that, now I want you to fine tune, okay? Drill down a bit more on what are the criteria for something to be a 1, 2, 3. Maybe you want to break it down to what makes it a 1, what makes it a 2, what makes it a 3, what makes it a 4, and do a cut again. And just keep drilling down. All right, drilling down. And if you still have an awful lot, maybe another question you could ask yourself would be, how many of whatever is it realistic given my space? How realistic is it for me to keep that many? How many do I really, truly need? Okay. To everyone, this is Carita, sorry. Is there anything that can be said to someone if they fail to accept reality of how many things they have? Well, that depends. If you're talking to someone else, Carita, you're better not to push that point, all right? Because if someone doesn't make I can live with it decisions because they have developed some insight, some awareness, all right? They're only going to mourn the loss of it. They're going to feel the void, and they probably will replace it, all right? So if it's someone else, maybe one of the things, if you are the individual who can have the tough talk with them, all right? And maybe they're not going to agree with you, but they're at least going to listen. Maybe you can ask them to run a little experiment. I've done that with clients where when we're going through things and we come across something that generally it's sentimental, sometimes it's intrinsic, it's almost never aesthetic, because that comes from a different place. And I'll say to them, how would it be, would you be willing to, this thing we're talking about maybe being not as necessary as the other items similar to it, would it be all right with you if you gave that to me and I kept it for 6 weeks? Okay, I'm going to take it with me. I'm going to keep it out of sight for 6 weeks. And if you haven't asked for it back in 6 weeks, now not the next week, all right, 6 weeks. At the 6-week mark, if on that 6th week you don't ask for it back, then can we agree that this little experiment might indicate it's not as useful or necessary as it feels right now? And would that help you to start thinning and actually having room for the things that are the most important to you? And you know what? When I do that, I don't think I have ever had somebody ask for it back. But here's the deal. You have to keep it for 6 weeks out of sight. And if they do ask for it in that 6th week, you have to give it back. All right? There is a point in decision making where it's the point of letting go that becomes the hurdle. That's the, and the next day, they're not really thinking about it too much, maybe once in a while. Within a few days, it's like, did they ever have it? Right? Because it's the decision making that is the difficult thing for them. And in order to prevent and avoid making decisions, not any decisions, difficult decisions, they're going to assign a meaning to it. Oh no, it's too important. Oh, I could do this, I could do that. But that's part of the fear, the insecurity of making a decision and then having the confidence that you can live with it. Okay. Look here. Yes, the 50, Pat. Good for you, Pat. And do it in 15 minutes a day. Really, truly do that. You've got a life to have as well. All right. How can you stop the accumulating? That's a tough one. And how do you figure out what to start with first? Maybe I could handle that next time. That's a more difficult question. That's a bigger question. I'm Maureen to everyone. I'm sorry I have, kept it early. Thanks. Your words often come up in my, yes, see? I don't have to be with you. My thoughts come up during in your mind, thinking about things. Okay, good. That's exactly like these things, these memories that we're all afraid of letting go of, or finding a more creative, outside the box way of cherishing them. Joan, I have someone who is going to work with me. Good. It just makes me feel terrible when they say, where do we start and what do you want me to do? Oh dear. I am so overwhelmed. These just trigger me. Joan, you know what I would do? I would give them, before you start working with them, good, I'm glad you have someone. Make sure that they are not making the decisions and they are not expressing opinions on your decisions. Give them the book, Conquer the Clutter, or get them to go to the library if you can't afford to get one, and have them read that book cover to cover before they start. It's an easy read. It's not going to take them all of that long. All right. They should have that foundation. It's too much for you to tell them what to do and how to do it. They should have a leg up, but good. And you know what? If they're volunteering, they're probably willing to do it. Okay. Miriam. It's in French. Vous avez dit de mieux savoir qui nous sommes I'm sorry. What I'll do, Miriam, is I will keep that message and I will translate it. I do speak French. I do read French, but I don't do it often enough to do it sort of in the moment. And we will answer that question next time. How about that? So besides chromosome 14, what are the three other genetic chromosomes? What three other chromosomes? I will answer that question next week, Lisa. All right, I have it in the book. I just don't remember the other numbers off the top of my head. Lisa, irrelevant to the conversation, but I really love your necklace. Okay. It's in English too, Miriam. It's in English too? Okay, here it is, Miriam. Sorry. Okay. You said to know better who we are, to listen to the conference again and find out who we are. I'm very, very interested to be able to listen again. How do we do that? Okay, so what you do is you go on the website, and Jim has posted. Jim, are they all posted now?
Not yet. I'll be posting them when I post the replay of this podcast.
Okay, so by tomorrow?
Yep.
Okay, by the end of tomorrow, Miriam, the remaining podcasts will be posted as well as this one. Okay? And they're on the website. Are they under podcast, Jim, or is there a special tab on the nav bar?
Oh, sorry. The last few have already been posted. Like last week's has already been posted. And I think the three, like the month before that is as well.
Okay.
And if you go on the website right at the top in the navigation bar or menu bar, it says Webcast Recordings.
Webcast Recording in the menu bar at the top of the face page of www.hoarding.ca.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Miriam, they're there. Okay. Okay, everyone, that is it for today. Thank you for your patience staying an extra 15 minutes. I think it's really important to answer those questions. Remember, I'm open to you sending me. I want you to figure out in what ways you know yourself better and identify what that means about what you specifically need. And come on back next week and we will be dealing with that as well as more information on self-assessment. I have some tools. I've run out of time though, and we will be dealing with those next week. I'll say some actual tools for you to use. You take care, everyone. Have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thank you, you too.
Bye now.
You're the best. You're the best.
Oh, thank you. So are you.
Thank you.
So are
Bye,
you.
everyone.